The document 1. The sun on Keprian was a harsh, sickly yellow. It did not warm the skin, it only baked it dry. The air was thin, tasting like copper and old dust. This was a mining world, a place of rocks and hard labor. It belonged to the Vilos Empire now. The empire did not care about the beauty of a planet. They only cared about what they could take from it. Ken stood in the middle of the quarry. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of a gloved hand. His clothes were gray and covered in red dirt. He looked like all the other men there, tired, thin, and broken. To the overseers walking above them, Ken was nothing. He was just a number. He was just a human. For 5 years, Earth had been quiet. The Great War had ended before it really began. The Vilos ships had appeared in the sky, huge and silver. They had not destroyed the cities. They had simply landed and taken over. Humanity was too divided, too confused to fight back. So, the Vilos did what they did with all primitive races. They put them to work. Ken picked up a heavy pickaxe. He swung it down into the black rock. Clang! The sound rang out, joining the rhythm of 1,000 other workers. Clang! 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 It was a song of misery. He looked to his left. Roy was working there. Roy was younger, maybe 20 years old. He had fire in his eyes, even when his body was weak. Roy swung the axe with anger, hitting the stone too hard. "Easy," a low voice said. It was Ben. Ben was an older man, his hair white and face lined with deep wrinkles. He had mined on Keprian for 10 years. He knew how to survive. "If you use too much energy, you will collapse before the sun sets," Ben said gently. "Then the guards will drag you away. And you do not want that." Roy stopped and leaned on his axe. He looked up at the high edge of the quarry. "I hate them," he whispered. "I hate looking at their green skin. I hate the way they click their teeth at us." "Hatred is heavy," Ken said, speaking for the first time. His voice was calm, very calm. "It makes the work harder." Roy looked at Ken. "How can you be so calm, Ken? We are slaves. We are dying in this hole." Ken looked at the rock in front of him. He did not look angry. He did not look sad. He looked like he was waiting for something. "We are not dying yet, Roy. We are just working." High above them, on a metal walkway, a Vilos guard walked by. The creature was tall and thin. It wore shiny black armor that reflected the yellow sun. It carried a long shock baton. The guard stopped and looked down at the humans. It did not see people. It saw livestock. It saw animals that needed to be driven. The guard made a clicking sound with its mouth. It pointed a long finger at a group of workers near the crushers. They were slowing down. The guard activated its baton. Blue electricity sparked at the tip. "Work faster, beasts." The guard's voice box translated. It was a mechanical, cold sound. The humans in that group scrambled. They moved with fear. The Vilos loved fear. It was the tool they used best. Fear kept the galaxy in order. Everyone feared the Empire. Everyone, except for the humans, seemed to accept their place. Ken went back to his work. He hit the stone. Clang. He hit it again. Clang. But his eyes were not on the rock. He was watching the sky. The sky was clear today. The yellow sun beat down without mercy. "Look at that," Ben said, pointing to a spot in the sky where a silver glint appeared. "A transport ship." They are taking the refined ore away. Good, Roy muttered. Take it all. Maybe when the rock is gone, they will leave us alone. They will not leave until every rock is dust, Ben said. A siren suddenly wailed across the quarry. It was a low, mournful sound. The workers froze. This was the lunch signal, but it was early. The guards did not like changes in the schedule. From the main building, the commander walked out. His name was Zul. He was bigger than the other guards. He wore a red cape, a sign of his high rank. 2 drones hovered over his shoulders, recording his image. He walked onto the platform overlooking the pit. Commander Zul tapped his microphone. His voice boomed over the loudspeakers, echoing off the canyon walls. Workers of Sector 4, Zul said. Your production is down by 3% this cycle. This is unacceptable. The Empire demands efficiency. He paused, letting the fear settle in the pit. To fix this mistake, I will remove the weak elements, Zul continued. I will remove those who pull the average down. He raised his hand. 6 guards walked onto the platform. Behind them, they dragged a human man. It was a young boy, no older than 18. He had been caught stealing water earlier that day. No, Roy gasped. That's just a kid. Ben grabbed Roy's arm. Don't move. Don't look up. Keep your eyes on the ground. Ken did not look down. He stood up straight. He watched the platform. This thief stole water, Zul announced. Water is a resource of the Empire. The punishment is death. The boy was thrown to his knees at the edge of the platform, 50 feet above the quarry floor. The guards raised their weapons. They were not batons this time, they were pulse rifles. The crowd in the pit began to murmur. The fear was a thick smell in the air. Wait, a voice said. It was not loud, but in the sudden silence of the quarry, it carried. It came from the center of the pit. Everyone turned. They looked at Ken. Ken was walking toward the platform. He was not running. He was not hiding. He walked with a steady pace. He left his pickaxe on the ground. Ken. Roy hissed. Get down. They will shoot you. Ken ignored him. He walked until he was standing directly below Commander Zul. He looked up. His face was dirty, but his eyes were clear. They were the eyes of a wolf, not a sheep. Commander Zul looked down, surprised. Step forward, human, Zul said, amused. Do you wish to beg for his life? Ken shook his head slowly. No, Ken said, his voice was strong. I do not beg. I am here to trade. The guards laughed. A mechanical, clicking laugh. Trade, Zul asked. You have nothing to trade. You own nothing. I have information, Ken said. Information, Zul sneered. A miner knows nothing of value. I know that your fleet communications array is vulnerable, Ken said calmly. I know that the shield harmonics on your dreadnoughts are destabilizing. I know that your emperor is afraid. The laughter stopped. The quarry became deadly silent. Zul leaned over the railing. What did you say? I said, Ken spoke louder, his voice echoing off the rocks, the emperor is afraid. He should be. You lie, Zul hissed. The drones zoomed down, focusing their cameras on Ken's face. Guards, kill this insolent creature. And the thief. 4 guards aimed their rifles at Ken. Ken did not flinch. He looked at Zul and spoke a phrase. It was not English. It was not the Vilos language. It was a string of sounds, a code from an ancient Earth dialect that the galactic translators were not programmed to handle properly. Kuku Undal. Man Sae. The translator units on the guard's armor crackled. Sparks flew. The drones hovering near Zul suddenly spun out of control and crashed into the metal deck. The guards looked at their weapons, confused. The power indicators flickered and died. "What is this?" Zul shouted. "Why do the systems fail?" Ken smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. "We told you," Ken said. "We are not just miners." Suddenly, the sound of the quarry changed. The rhythmic clang of the pickaxes stopped. In unison, thousands of workers dropped their tools. The sound of metal hitting stone was replaced by the sound of feet moving in formation. It was a soft sound, like sand shifting, but it was everywhere. Roy stood up next to Ken. He wasn't looking at the ground anymore. He reached into the dirt, under a rock where he had hidden something wrapped in oilcloth. He pulled out a heavy, black pistol. It was an ancient weapon, a slug thrower. It had no electronics to jam. It used gunpowder and lead. Ben pulled out a similar weapon from his belt. All across the quarry, men and women were revealing hidden compartments in their boots, in their waistbands, in the piles of ore. They were pulling out knives, old rifles, and explosives. The Vilos guards stood on the platform, holding useless metal sticks. They pressed the triggers, but nothing happened. Their armor, which relied on energy to move, locked up. They became statues. "What is happening?" Zul screamed. "Shoot them. Shoot them all." Ken looked up at the terrified commander. He looked at the young boy who was still on his knees, shaking. "The sleep is ending," Ken said simply. He raised his hand and made a fist. A single shot rang out from the rim of the quarry. It was loud, much louder than the mining tools. The guard standing next to Zul fell backward, a hole in his chest. The silence of the cosmos was about to be broken. Roy looked at Ken, his eyes wide with a mix of terror and excitement. "Is this it?" Roy asked. "Is this the strike?" Ken looked around the pit. The humans were not afraid anymore. The air was electric. It was time. "Yes," Ken said, checking his own weapon. "Earth is striking back. Tell the others to take the armory. Leave no guard standing." Roy turned to the workers near him. "You heard the man. Move." The cry went up. It started as a low growl and grew into a roar. It was a sound that had not been heard in this sector of the galaxy for 1,000 years. It was the sound of humans fighting back. And on the bridge of the Vilos flagship in orbit, a warning light blinked red. But it was too late. The trap had been sprung. Document 2. The silence in the quarry did not last long. It was broken by the sharp, terrifying crack of Roy's pistol. The sound was not the clean pew of Vilos energy weapons. It was a thunderclap, a physical blow to the air that smelled of smoke and sulfur. The bullet struck the shoulder pad of the guard on the platform, spinning him around. The Vilos armor, designed to deflect heat and laser beams, crumpled against the force of the lead slug. The guard fell, screaming in a high, clicking language. He tried to stand, but his leg would not hold him. "Fire!" Roy shouted. He did not wait to see if the guard would get up. He fired again. This time, the shot found a gap in the neck armor. The guard went still. Pandemonium erupted in the mining pit. For 5 years, the humans had been nothing more than shadows, bending their backs and lowering their eyes. Now, they were a storm. Thousands of workers threw down their pickaxes. They reached into the dirt, into their boots, and into the hidden pockets of their rags. Ben moved with surprising speed for an older man. He pulled a large knife from his belt and grabbed the ladder that led up to the lower platform. "Follow me," he yelled to the men near him. "The guards are blind. They cannot see us." High above on the main platform, Commander Zil was pounding his fist on his console. "Status report," he screamed into his comms unit. "Why are my weapons offline? Override the system." Code red. The computer screen in front of him flickered with static. Then, a symbol appeared. It was not a Vilo's crest. It was a simple, crude drawing of a blue circle and white landmasses. It was the ancient flag of Earth. The speakers crackled to life, but Zil's voice did not come out. Instead, a calm, female voice filled the air. It was June, speaking from somewhere hidden in the communications bunker. "Vilo's command," June's voice said. "Your firewalls are breached. Your targeting arrays are scrambled. You are blind. You are deaf. You are alone." Zil backed away from the console, his mandibles clicking together in fear. He looked over the edge of the platform. The scene below was a nightmare for an Imperial commander. His guards were running. Their suits, powered by the same energy grid that Ken had jammed, were locking up. They were heavy metal shells that could not move. The humans were swarming over them like ants. They used pry bars and mining drills to pry open the armor plates. They did not use energy beams. They used brute force. They were tearing the superior technology apart with their bare hands. Ken watched from the center of the chaos. He was not running yet. He was waiting. He pulled a small device from his pocket, a detonator. He pressed a single button. A mile away, at the main power generator for the camp, an explosion shook the ground. It was not a nuclear blast, but a precise chemical charge planted years ago by a resistance unit. The lights in the camp flickered and died completely. The hum of the electric fences vanished. The automated turrets, which were tracking the humans, slumped forward. "We have darkness," Ken said into the small radio on his wrist. "Roy, take the east gate. Ben, secure the armory. I need the heavy weapons." "I'm on it." Roy's voice came back, breathless and filled with adrenaline. "These guys are slow without their power suits." Roy ran toward the east wall, firing his pistol at the remaining guards. A younger man named Paul ran beside him. Paul was carrying a heavy bag of mining explosives. "Don't waste ammo," Roy yelled. "Aim for the eyes." Paul laughed, a wild, crazy sound. "I don't need ammo for this," he shouted. He threw a bag of explosive powder at a cluster of 3 guards. He pulled the fuse. "Fire in the hole." The explosion sent the guards flying. Their metal suits were blackened and dented. In the Vilo's high command orbiting the planet, panic was setting in. The officers on the bridge stared at their screens. The mining colony on Keprian was not sending a distress signal. It was sending nothing. "Admiral," a young tactical officer said, his voice trembling. "We have lost contact with the garrison." "Send a recon drone," the admiral hissed. "Shoot anything that moves." "It is too late," the tactical officer replied. "I am reading multiple energy signatures on the surface. They are not ours. They are primitive chemical signatures." "Gunpowder." "Gunpowder," the admiral laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "They are throwing rocks at us." "No, "Sir," the officer said, watching the data stream. "They are taking the garrison apart." Back on the surface, the battle had shifted from a riot to a tactical assault. The chaos was fake. It looked like a riot, but if you watched closely, you could see the organization. Ken walked through the smoke, stepping over the debris. He walked toward the main gate where the Vilo's light vehicles were parked. A guard was hiding behind a hover truck, trying to fix his rifle. Ken walked up to him. The guard looked up, his large black eyes terrified. Ken did not shoot him. He simply took the rifle from the guard's hands and broke it over his knee. "Tell your emperor," Ken said, his voice low. "Tell him we are awake." The guard scrambled away, running into the dark desert. June's voice came over the radio again. "Ken, the sky is dark. They will try to bomb us from orbit soon. We need to move to the second phase." "I know," Ken said. He looked around the quarry. The humans were cheering. They were stripping the dead guards of their armor and weapons. They felt like they had won. But Ken knew better. This was just the beginning. The Empire had thousands of ships. They had millions of soldiers. One mining camp was nothing. They needed to send a message that the entire galaxy would understand. "Roy!" Ken shouted. "Stop celebrating. Get the trucks running. We need to load the artillery." Roy appeared from the smoke, dragging a large crate. He was sweating, but he had a huge grin on his face. "Did you see that, Ken? Did you see them fall? They aren't invincible. They bleed just like us." "They bleed," Ken agreed. "But they will call their friends. We need to be ready when they arrive." Ben approached them, carrying a stolen Vilo's plasma cannon. It was heavy, but he held it with ease. "The armory is secure," Ben said. "We have enough explosives to blow this whole mountain if we have to." "Don't blow the mountain yet," Ken said. "We need to take the anti-air battery. If they bomb us from space, we can't fight back. But if we can make them scared to come close, then we hold the sky," Ben finished for him. The three men looked at the dark sky above. The stars were bright and cold. Somewhere up there, the Vilo's fleet was watching. They were confused. They were wondering why their slaves were suddenly masters of the battlefield. "We move in 10 minutes, Ken ordered. "Leave the wounded in the medical bay. The rest of you, grab a weapon. If you don't know how to use it, point it at the enemy and pull the trigger. We are humans. We learn fast." The workers moved with new purpose. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold anger. They had been beaten, starved, and humiliated. Tonight, they were taking back their dignity. Roy climbed into the driver's seat of a captured Vilo's troop transport. He fiddled with the controls. "Okay, let's see. Green to go, red to stop." "Green," Ken said, climbing into the passenger seat. "Just don't crash it." "We don't have insurance." Roy laughed. He slammed his hand on the dashboard. The engine roared to life. The hover lifts hissed, lifting the heavy vehicle off the ground. "Let's go hunting," Roy said. The transport moved out, followed by 3 others. They headed toward the ridge where the anti-air cannons were located. It was a steep climb, but the trucks were powerful. As they drove, June's voice whispered in their earpieces. "I am tracking a Vilo's transport ship entering the atmosphere. It is coming for a landing at the main port. They are coming to check on the silence." "Good," Ken said, looking at the gun mounted on the back of the truck. "Let's give them a welcome." The trucks tore through the desert night, their headlights cutting through the dust. The rebellion on Keprian was no longer a secret. It was a hornet's nest, and the Vilos Empire had just kicked it. Ken checked his ammo. He looked at the determined faces of the men and women in the truck. They were miners, farmers, and shopkeepers. They were not soldiers. But tonight, they were an army. The cosmos was quiet, listening. But Earth had found its voice, and it was shouting. Document 3. The 3 stolen hover trucks tore across the desert floor, kicking up massive clouds of red dust behind them. The ride was rough and noisy. The engines roared like angry beasts, a stark contrast to the quiet, humming engines the Vilos usually used. Inside the lead truck, Ken held onto the handle above the door with one hand and a map with the other. Roy was driving, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. He was grinning, but his eyes were focused on the dark horizon. Steady, Ken said over the noise of the wind. Don't overheat the engine. We need this truck to get us up the ridge. I got it, Roy shouted back. I'm just trying to shake the dust off. In the back of the truck, Ben and 3 other men were struggling with the heavy plasma cannon they had stolen. They were trying to secure it to the floor so it wouldn't slide around. Careful with that, Ben yelled. If it goes off in here, we won't even know we died. They were approaching the anti-air battery. It was situated on a high ridge overlooking the main landing pad. From here, the Vilos could shoot down any ship trying to leave or enter. But tonight, the guns were silent. The crew up there was likely confused by the power failure at the main camp. Ken looked up through the windshield. The sky was changing. Where there had been only stars, a bright light was growing. It was the glow of a Vilos heavy transport entering the atmosphere. It was a giant ship, shaped like a silver spear. It was coming fast. They are early, June's voice said in Ken's earpiece. The signal was a bit crackly, but clear enough. That ship carries a full battalion of shock troops. If they land before you take those guns, the rebellion is over. We are almost there, Ken said. Roy slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop at the base of the steep ridge. There was no road going up. We have to climb, Ken shouted, throwing the door open. Everyone jumped out. They didn't argue. They didn't complain about the weight of their gear. They started running up the rocky slope. Ben was breathing heavy, but he kept pace with the younger men. Roy was ahead, charging up the hill like a goat. At the top of the ridge, the anti-air bunker was a small dome of gray metal. 2 Vilos guards stood outside, looking down at the approaching lights of the transport ship. They hadn't noticed the humans climbing up the dark hill behind them yet. Ken signaled to Roy. Roy pointed his rifle at the guard on the left, Ken aimed at the one on the right. They didn't need words. They had drilled for this in their minds 1,000 times. Bang! Bang! 2 shots. 2 guards fell. They didn't even have time to reach for their alarms. Move. Ken ran to the blast door. It was locked, of course. But the Empire relied too much on electronic locks. Without power, the door was just a slab of metal. Explosives? Ben yelled. Paul, the young man with the bag of bombs, ran forward. He slapped a thick slab of gray clay onto the hinge of the door. He stuck a detonator in it and they all turned away, covering their ears. Boom! The door blew inward with a cloud of smoke. Ken was the first one through the hole. Inside, there were 4 Vilos operators. They were panicking, trying to reboot their consoles. Don't move, Ken ordered. The operators turned, their hands raising in surrender. They had no weapons. They were techs, not soldiers. Get them out of here, Ben said, shoving the aliens toward the exit. Tie them up in the storage room. Ken ran to the main control panel. It was a mess of buttons and screens. But he wasn't looking to type. He pulled a small drive from his pocket and jammed it into a port. A moment later, the screens turned green. June, Ken asked into the radio. I'm in, June's voice replied, sounding much clearer now. Bypassing their firewalls. Turning the targeting system online. You have control of the guns. Outside, the massive Vilos transport ship was descending. It was huge, blotting out the stars. It was coming down right on top of the main camp. It looked like a mountain falling from the sky. They are going to crush the camp, Roy said, looking out the window. He was scared. If that ship landed, it would flatten everything. Not today, Ken said. He grabbed the manual firing lever. June, load the target. That transport is the only thing in the sky. Target locked, she said. The massive twin barrels of the anti-air battery rotated on the roof. They groaned as they moved, pointing up toward the descending silver giant. The Vilos pilot of the transport ship saw the movement. He must have been confused. Why was the ground battery aiming at a friendly ship? Hold, Ken whispered. The ship was 2,000 feet up. Then 1,000. It was slowing down to land. Its belly doors were opening, ready to drop out hundreds of soldiers. Ken looked at his crew. Ben was wiping grease from his hands. Roy was staring out the window, his face grim. Let them know, Ken said. Fire. Ken pulled the lever back. The sound was deafening. It was like the sky cracking open. Two huge beams of blue energy shot out from the ridge. They streaked across the night sky and slammed into the side of the transport ship. The impact was blinding. The transport ship, a marvel of Vilos engineering, shuddered. Its shields flared bright blue and then shattered. The beams tore through the hull, cutting into the engine room. A second explosion rocked the ship. Fire and smoke erupted from its side. The ship began to tilt. It lost control. It spun slowly, crashing into the side of the mountain next to the quarry. The sound of the crash was a thundering rumble that shook the ground beneath Ken's feet. Debris rained down, flaming metal and glass. The ship had never touched the ground. It was a wreck, burning on the mountainside. Ken let go of the lever. He took a deep breath. Bullseye, Ben said, slapping Ken on the back. June, status report, Ken said. The transport is destroyed, June said. Her voice sounded proud. And Ken, look up. Look at the sky. Ken walked out of the bunker and stood on the edge of the ridge. High above the atmosphere, the Vilos blockade was breaking up. The Imperial ships were moving away. Why are they running? Roy asked, watching the silver dots move in the distance. Because they don't know what we have, Ken said. They saw one of their biggest ships get shot down by a mining camp. They are afraid. Suddenly, space itself seemed to tear open. It wasn't the smooth jump gate the Vilos used. It was violent. A hole in reality ripped open above the planet. Out of that hole came ships. But they weren't Vilos ships. They weren't sleek and silver. They were blocky, gray, and ugly. They were heavily armored, covered in turrets and missile launchers. They looked like they were made of scrap metal and rage. Ken smiled. He recognized those designs. He had seen the blueprints years ago. Is that? Ben started. Yes, Ken said. That is the United Earth Defense Front. The Earth ships moved with purpose. They didn't fly in perfect, gentle curves like the aliens. They moved aggressively, charging toward the retreating Vilos fleet. A voice came over the radio, loud and commanding. It was not June. It was Captain Paul, the leader of the Earth forces. Attention all human resistance cells on Keprian, Captain Paul's voice boomed. This is the ESS Vanguard. We have breached the perimeter. The sky belongs to us now. Hold your positions. The cavalry is here. Roy let out a cheer that echoed across the ridge. He jumped up and down, pumping his fist. Did you hear that, the cavalry? We are saved. Ken watched the Earth ships engage the remaining Vilos scouts in orbit. Bright flashes of light signaled destruction. The universe was no longer silent. It was filled with the noise of war, and for the first time in 5 years, it was a noise humans were making. We aren't saved yet, Roy, Ken said, but he was smiling too. But we aren't alone anymore. And that changes everything. The iron rain began. The debris from the destroyed Vilos transport ship was burning up in the atmosphere, falling to the ground like shooting stars. But to the humans watching from the ridge, it looked like fireworks. It was a celebration. Get back to the trucks, Ken ordered. We need to get to the main landing pad. Captain Paul will be dropping troops. We need to link up with them before morning. As they ran down the hill, Ken felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The plan had worked. The sleep was over, and Earth had struck back. The cosmos had gone quiet because the enemy was terrified, but down here, on the dusty red ground of Keprian, humanity was roaring. Document 4. The dust from the crash was still settling when the first Earth drop ships arrived. They were not elegant like the Vilos vessels. They looked like giant metal bricks, with engines that roared so loudly they shook the bones in your chest. They descended with fire and smoke, landing hard on the rocky plain of the mining camp. Their ramp slammed down, and heavy boots hit the ground. Ken stood by the stolen truck, watching the soldiers pour out. They wore dark green armor, bulky and thick, covered in pouches and equipment. They carried large rifles that looked simple but dangerous. These were not prisoners. These were the United Earth Defense Front. A tall man walked down the ramp of the lead ship. He removed his helmet, revealing a face weathered by years of space travel. He had short gray hair and a scar running down his left cheek. This was Captain Paul. Ken stepped forward, flanked by Roy and Ben. They were still wearing their dirty mining clothes, covered in red dust and alien blood. Captain Paul looked at them, then at the wreckage of the Vilos transport ship smoking in the distance. Ken, Captain Paul said. His voice was deep and serious. He extended a hand. Ken shook it. Captain. You are late. We had traffic, Paul said with a slight smirk. Glad to see you managed not to get killed before we got here. We did okay, Roy said, unable to hide his excitement. We blew up the transport, took the ridge, and stole their trucks. Paul looked at Roy, then at the anti-air battery on the hill. I see. Good work. The fleet command in orbit said your signal jamming was perfect. The Vilos are blind, deaf, and scared right now. Ben coughed, spitting red dust onto the ground. Scared is good. But they will be angry soon. They don't like to lose. No, they don't, Paul agreed. He turned and waved his hand forward. Sergeant. Bring the prisoner. 2 Earth soldiers dragged a figure out of the ship. It was a Vilos officer. He was missing his armor and his hands were tied with heavy plastic cuffs. He looked terrified. His green skin was pale, and his many eyes were wide with confusion. The Vilos believed humans were too stupid to organize a war. Seeing an Earth army on his planet broke his mind. Captain Paul walked up to the alien. "Translate for him," Paul said to a small device on his shoulder. "Can you understand me?" Paul asked the alien. The alien clicked his teeth. "Yes. I understand. You are the primitive race. You are, the noise." Paul laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was cold. "We are the noise. And we are going to be very loud. Listen to me. You are going to send a message to your high command." "I will not betray the Empire," the alien hissed. "You won't have to," Paul said. "You are going to tell them the truth. You are going to tell them that Earth has returned. You are going to tell them that we have weapons you cannot defend against. And if they send another ship to Keprian, we will not destroy it. We will capture it." "You cannot capture a dreadnought," the alien said. "Watch us," Ken said softly. Paul nodded to his men. "Hook him up to the long-range transmitter. Boost the signal. I want the entire sector to hear this." While the soldiers dragged the alien away, Ken, Paul, June, and Ben gathered around a holographic map table on the back of a troop carrier. June had arrived from her hiding spot in the communications bunker. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright. "The Vilos fleet is regrouping at the edge of the system," June said, pointing at red dots on the map. "They are confused. Their ships are designed to fight energy shields. They don't know how to fight us." "Why?" Roy asked. "Because we use bullets." "Partly," Ken said. "But mostly because of the virus. We spent 50 years learning their language and their code. We let them capture us so we could put our people inside their systems. We know their shield harmonics. We know the frequency of their engines." "Exactly," June said. "Which brings us to the next phase." Paul touched the table, and a large image of a strange machine appeared. It looked like a tall, spindly tower with a satellite dish on top. "What is that?" Ben asked. "That is the cascading EMP device," Paul said. "It is our new toy. The scientists back home built it using scrap and reverse-engineered Vilos tech. When we turn it on, it won't just turn off lights. It sends a pulse through hyperspace. It will fry every Vilos circuit in this entire sector." "Every circuit?" Roy asked, his eyes wide. "Even their ships?" "Especially their ships," Ken said. "Without engines, without life support, without shields, the Vilos are helpless. They are soft creatures. They rely on technology for everything. We don't." Ben looked at the map. "So, we turn it on, and their ships just stop. They drift," Paul said. "They become coffins. We are not going to destroy the fleet, gentlemen. We are going to turn it into a floating junkyard." "That seems..." Ben hesitated. "Cruel." Ken looked at the alien prisoners being loaded onto a ship. He remembered the boy on his knees at the edge of the quarry. He remembered the whips and the starvation. "No, Ben," Ken said. "It is not cruel. It is necessary. They came to our home and took our families. They treated us like animals. If we destroy them, they become martyrs. If we leave them helpless, floating in the dark, listening to their air run out, the galaxy will understand who is really in charge. The group went silent. They understood. This was not just a war for territory. It was a psychological war. The Empire ruled through fear. Earth was going to show them that humans were the thing to be feared. Get the tower up, Paul ordered. We have a small window before the Vilos realize their comms are jammed and attack blindly. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. The Earth soldiers and the human prisoners worked together. There were no ranks anymore. There was only the mission. Roy led a team to unload the heavy parts of the EMP tower from a transport ship. Ben used his knowledge of the mines to help find the best spot to ground the machine. Ken stood with Captain Paul, watching the horizon. The sky was beginning to turn light purple as the yellow sun started to rise. "Do you think they will surrender?" Ken asked. "Not yet," Paul said. "They are arrogant. They will think this is a trick. They will send a flagship to crush us. That is when we hit them. And if the device fails, then we fight the old way," Paul said, patting the pistol on his hip. "Bullet by bullet. But it won't fail. June built the software." June walked up to them, wiping grease from her hands. "It is ready," she said. "The tower is active. We are linked to the fleet in orbit. They are ready to broadcast the pulse." Paul nodded. He looked at his soldiers. They were all in position, looking at the sky. He looked at Ken, Roy, Ben, and all the miners. They stood tall. "This is it," Paul announced, his voice booming over the loudspeakers. "For 5 years, we bowed our heads. For 5 years, we let them believe they were superior. Today, we remind the galaxy why humanity is the apex predator." Paul looked at June. "Do it." June pressed a key on her laptop. There was no explosion. No sound. Just a feeling, like a sudden drop in air pressure. Far above them, in the blackness of space, the Vilos fleet suddenly went dark. Their running lights blinked out. Their engines stopped. In the camp, the few remaining Vilos electronic devices, doors, clocks, drones all fell to the ground lifeless. Ken looked up. He couldn't see the ships, but he knew what was happening. Thousands of Vilos soldiers were floating in the dark, panic-stricken, cut off from their command. The silence that followed was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a held breath. "They are blind," Ken whispered. "No," Paul corrected him. "They are deaf, dumb, and helpless. Now, we talk." He turned to the communication officer. "Open a channel to the Vilos flagship. Let's see if their emperor is listening." Document 5. The bridge of the Vilos flagship, the Dominion, was a place of cold precision usually. But now, it was dark and cold in a way the crew had never experienced. The holographic star maps were gone. The gentle hum of the gravity drive was silent. The red emergency lights offered a dim, spooky glow. Admiral Vrax stood in the center of the chaos. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving under his ornate silver armor. Around him, officers were running to manual stations, but there was nothing they could do. Their touch screens were dead. Their helmets were useless pieces of metal. "Report!" Vrax shouted, though he knew it was useless. "The propulsion is offline, sir," a tactical officer said, his voice shaking with fear. "Life support is running on backup batteries. We have nothing." The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of defeat. For 1,000 years, the Vilos Empire had moved from star to star, taking what they wanted. They had never encountered a species that could stop them. They had never fought an enemy that could turn their own technology against them. On the planet below, the communication array in the captured base buzzed. It was an old analog system, connected to a wire that ran up the mountain. It was not connected to the main network, so it still worked. Captain Paul stood in front of the microphone. Ken stood beside him, along with Roy, Ben, and June. They looked tired, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat, but they stood straight. "Channel open," June said. "They can hear us." Paul leaned in. "This is Captain Paul of the United Earth Defense Front to the Vilos flagship Dominion. Do you copy?" There was a crackle of static, followed by a weak, angry voice. "This is Admiral Vrax. You have committed suicide, humans. We have 100 ships in the sector. Once we reboot, we will burn your planet to glass." "You are not going to reboot, Admiral," Paul said calmly. "And you are not going to burn anything. Look out your window, Vrax." On the bridge of the Dominion, Vrax walked to the viewport. He looked down at the blue and brown planet below. It looked peaceful. But then, he saw the small shapes rising from the atmosphere. They were not missiles. They were Earth drop ships. Dozens of them. They were moving toward his stranded fleet. "What are they doing?" Vrax whispered. "They are coming to inspect you," Paul's voice came over the speaker, echoing in the silent bridge. "We have disabled your engines. We have turned off your shields. You are sitting in the dark, Admiral. And we are holding the light. You cannot board a Vilos dreadnought with primitive shuttles." Vrax screamed. "My men will tear you apart." "Your men have no power suits," Paul corrected him. "They have no energy weapons. They have no air recycling. In 2 hours, your air will run out. My men have simple guns and knives. We don't need electricity to kill." Ken stepped closer to the microphone. "Admiral. This is Ken. I was a miner on Keprian. I spent 5 years watching your guards beat my friends. I watched you steal our water and our food. We are not going to kill you, Vrax. That would be too easy." "Then what do you want?" Vrax asked. The arrogance was gone from his voice now. It was replaced by fear. "We want you to leave," Ken said. "We are sending tugs to tow your ships to the edge of the system. You will leave this sector. You will never come back. And you will send a message to the Emperor. Tell him that Earth is not a farm. Tell him that we are the wolves in the forest." "And if we refuse?" Vrax asked, though he sounded defeated. "Then we leave you there," Ken said. "We watch on our screens as your air runs out. We watch as you freeze in the dark. The choice is yours." The line went silent for a long time. The crew on the bridge of the Dominion looked at their admiral. They looked at the dark screens. They looked at the oxygen gauge, which was slowly ticking down. They were terrified. Vrax slumped his shoulders. He looked at his hands. He was the master of the galaxy, but right now, he was helpless against a primitive race. We accept," Vrax said softly. "Do not fire." "Smart choice," Paul said. "Start moving your people to the upper decks. Our tugs will lock on in 30 minutes. The communication channel cut. In the base, a cheer went up. It was a cheer of relief and victory. Roy slapped Ken on the back, nearly knocking him over. "We did it. We actually did it." Ben smiled, looking at the ceiling. "I never thought I would see the day." June was typing furiously on her laptop. "The fleet is powering down their weapons. They are surrendering, Ken. It's over. It is not over, Ken said, looking out the window at the morning sun. The yellow sun was rising, casting long shadows across the mining camp. The camp looked different now. The fences were down. The guard towers were empty. The war is just starting. The Empire has thousands of worlds. They won't let this go. Then we will take them all, Roy said, his eyes burning with determination. One by one. Captain Paul walked over to them. He looked at his crew and the former prisoners. The ship is ready to take us back to the fleet headquarters. There is a lot of work to do. We need to plan the next offensive. We need to train more soldiers. He looked at Ken. You coming, Ken? Ken looked at the mine. He looked at the red dirt. He had spent years here, but he didn't belong here anymore. He belonged to the stars now. Yes, Ken said. I'm coming. They walked out of the building and into the light of the new day. The noise of the base was changing. It wasn't the sound of mining anymore. It was the sound of engines, and people talking, and hope. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Vilos Empire had been beaten. Not by a stronger army, but by a smarter one. The cosmos went quiet as other species watched. The slavers, the conquerors, the tyrants, they all paused. They looked at the blue planet called Earth. They realized that the humans were not cattle. They were not servants. They were something much more dangerous. They were a sleeping giant that had finally woken up. On the bridge of the Earth flagship Vanguard, Captain Paul stood next to Ken and looked out at the stars. The Vilos ships were drifting away, towed by Earth tugs, leaving the system forever. What do you think happens now? Ken asked. Now, Paul smiled. Now, we get to work. We have a galaxy to remind who is in charge. Ken nodded. He looked at the endless dark space. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a canvas. And humanity was holding the brush. The universe was quiet, listening to the sound of Earth rising. And for the first time in history, the stars were afraid of us.